This morning as we begin, I want to thank Michelle for incorporating and using a basket. I happened to take a basket with me this morning as well, so it was not planned that we both had baskets. But I took this because this is one of perhaps my favorite, if not my favorite, baskets that we've got at home. And my husband and I have a handful of them. But this particular basket we received not this past Christmas, but the Christmas of 2013. And it was, obviously you see it's got a lid on it, but it was filled with all kinds of wonderful good things to eat. Fresh pears, some nuts and candies, and some crackers and cheese and meats. But it was a gift that was provided in love from Mike's parents. This is why this basket means a great deal to me. It's because it was given in love, filled with things that were offered and given in love. And this morning we're going to hear a story, just as Michelle said, about a basket. And in that basket was placed a gift of love. Let's look together at Exodus 2 to see if we can discover a little bit more about the reason that this gift of love was offered, shall we? Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sisters stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. "This must be one of the Hebrews' children," she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes." So the girl went and called her child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she took him as her son. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The unnamed couple in this passage are named later in Exodus 6, or at least we learn of their names. It's Amram and Jochebed. And they are married. And in the course of their marriage, they had some children. Now, they had already had a couple of children prior to this child being conceived. They had Aaron, and they also had Miriam. And now they conceive again, and at about 3 months of hiding this child, they discover they can hide this child no longer. But why on earth would they be hiding a child and need to hide this child for 3 months? Well, you see, it's because of one of their relatives, something amazing this relative had done, but also something that Pharaoh had forgotten. And there was a new Pharaoh ruling the land at this time who didn't know of this relative of theirs, relative Joseph. Joseph being one of Israel's 12 children. Jochebed and Amram coming from one of the tribes of Israel's 12 children. They didn't know that Joseph had saved God's people and saved all the people of Egypt during this great famine. And during that time, Israel's children, Joseph's siblings and family, all moved and settled in Egypt. And when they did, they began to multiply and grow. But because this Pharaoh didn't remember what Joseph had done, all he saw was this increasing population of people, and he began to get a little bit more fearful because they were not only increasing in number, but they were becoming more powerful. And so here's his thought: I'm going to turn this group of people into a forced labor camp for me. In other words, I'm going to make them become my slaves. Great idea, I guess. Only that wasn't enough. Because then in time, it turns from a group of forced labor into, in order to control this population, it's probably going to be best if we do away with some of them. So how about if when these women are giving birth to their children, I instruct the midwives to take the lives of just the baby boys. We'll let the girls live, but take the lives of the baby boys. Now this strikes me as very interesting because this might in time control the population, but I'd like to think this Pharaoh's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Because in time, what's going to happen is, your population might start to decrease a little, but what's it going to do to the labor force? You just said, I need to construct and build things for me. It's going to impact the labor force he just wanted to implement. I don't know. Interesting. But in time, apparently, this wasn't even enough. So what he does next, because there were a couple of women who were working against Pharaoh to some degree, Shiphrah and Puah, who said, these women are really strong. They give birth to the children before we get there. So his next idea is, let's take all the baby boys and put them in the river Nile to drown. But we'll let the baby girls live. Put them in the river Nile, also known as the river of life. Can you just imagine the parents that were expecting children and the fear that they must have felt, wondering, we're expecting this life, and the minute this child comes to be, are we going to be able to hold this child in our arms, or is it going to be snatched and taken away from us and put into the river? There no doubt had to be some fear. And yet Amram and Jochebed do not give in to that fear. They do not succumb to the fear, but rather they see this child who's beautiful, who's fine, who's good, just as God declared creation to be good. And they take this baby and they hide him for 3 months. No easy task. I'm sure we've all heard a newborn cry, or even a child between newborn and 3 months cry. The difficulty of trying to hide a child for 3 months, I can only imagine. Yet they manage to do this for 3 months, and when they can hide him no longer, she takes a basket. Now, the basket that I have here with me today is not as large as the basket that Moses would have been placed in. At its widest at the top here, this basket measures 16 inches from inside to inside, and at the bottom, it's maybe 12 at the most. And for fun, the largest thing I was able to get in here this week is a turkey we've got in our freezer. That turkey weighs just over 11 pounds and is about 14 inches maybe in length. And that weighed it down pretty heavy. The average size of a baby boy today is roughly 14 inches in length, give or take an inch on either end, and roughly 24 pounds. So a baby would not fit in this basket. And as Michelle already said, the baskets that were made in that time frame were made significantly different. Now, I want to show you a couple images behind me. You're going to see an image of a papyrus basket there alongside an ark. Both of these would have been covered with, it said bitumen in here, but that's like slime or tar. They would have been covered by slime or tar and pitch to make them watertight. Now, let me ask you this. Which one would you rather ride in, or which one would you rather put a child in? The basket or the ark? Who said basket? Really? Huh. I'd probably, given the time frame we live in, I'd probably choose the ark. It's made of gopher wood. But things of that time, they used papyrus reeds for a variety of things, and these reeds would grow to be about 10 feet in length. But they would use them to make baskets, they would use them to make shoes, they would use them for writing paper, and little do we maybe know, they would also use them to make lightweight boats, arks. And you heard in our translation that this read, she went and got a papyrus basket. If we were to read the King James Version, it would say she went and took an ark of bulrushes. I think the King James Version gets this one right. She took an ark of bulrushes, or an ark of papyrus reeds, the very same word that's used for ark in Genesis 8, the story of Noah and the ark. And it certainly would recall that story of Noah and the chaotic waters and what was going on there, and how God delivered God's people safely on an ark. So she takes this baby boy, places him in this ark of bulrushes, or in this basket of papyrus, and places him gently and safely among the reeds. What a sacrifice. What a sacrifice. She places this gift of love in a basket and places this gift in the reeds. Now, I don't know if she knew the Pharaoh's daughter's her schedule for the day, if she had been watching and knew that she would often go down there to bathe or not. But regardless if she knew, still to put her child in a basket there in a lightweight boat, that takes a lot of guts. And she doesn't leave the child there alone. She instructs Miriam to watch over the child. And lo and behold, Pharaoh's daughter does come down to bathe. She sees the basket floating, and she instructs her attendants to go and get the basket. And when she takes off the lid, she sees inside this child who's crying, and she takes pity on the child. Miriam's watching all this, and she sees what's going on, and it doesn't take her long. She springs into action, and she runs up there and says, "Should I get a nurse for you?" "Yes, yes." And who does she go and get? Her mom. Her mom, who's instructed to take care of the child, and she will be paid. Now we've got Jochebed, who's already disobeyed the Pharaoh's edict. We've got Miriam, who's going along at mother's instruction to disobey the Pharaoh's edict. And now we've got Pharaoh's own daughter disobeying her father, the Pharaoh's edict. Do away with all the boys, but let the children, or let the women, the girls live. Oh, and look what these three girls, these three daughters do. How amazing. This offering that she gives, she receives back. And then some. She's going to get to spend the next 2 to 3 years, because that's how long these Mesopotamian contracts for nurses often extended, were about 2 to 3 years. You're going to take this child, and I want you to nurse him for 2 to 3 years, and then when that time period is done, you bring him that back. And not only that, are you going to get to spend the formative years of this child's life together with him? I'm going to pay you to do it. She's going to get paid to do something she would have done anyway. Is God good or what? After these 2 to 3 years are up, she brings him back. Talk about a sacrifice. We've received gifts in baskets before. I already told you about the gift we received in this basket. We've given gifts in baskets before. I cannot imagine giving a gift to that extreme. And yet Miriam and Jochebed were faithful. This is not a story of a mother's disregard for life, like perhaps you've seen and read on the news this week, about the mother's disregard of life, her children's own life. The woman I'm talking about from Detroit. But this is a story of a woman who valued life, seeking to preserve the life of her child, and in time, the life of her people. And so she takes this child, puts him in a papyrus basket, an ark of bulrushes, places him in the reeds, and offers this gift of life, receiving this gift of life back, to eventually offer this gift of life once again to Pharaoh's daughter. The time that she had with Moses was a very important time. Some people have said those first couple of years of a child's life are the most important, the most formative, the time when a parent has the most impact on a child, and I tend to believe that's true. And here's why. We're going to take a look at what happens to Moses later on in Hebrews 11. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called a son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to share ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered abuse suffered for the Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to the reward. He was looking ahead to the reward. And we know in time that he was reunited with his family. But still, the sacrifice that Jochebed made not once but twice in offering her son as a gift. And it makes me wonder, what are we willing to sacrifice? What gifts are we willing to place in a basket for the glory of God? Which is what her name means, for the glory of God. Brian Kluth tells a story on givewithjoy.org about a woman. This woman is a single mother who received just a very small amount of money every month from her ex-husband to buy groceries. However, the amount that he would give her wasn't even enough to feed one person, let alone her small family of 4. And Nancy had been praying to God about what to do. And one day she decided, I'm going to take a step of faith, and even though I have nothing left over, not even enough to live on myself, I'm going to trust God to provide and give. I am going to financially give to God. And amazing things happened when she did. She was blessed beyond measure. She ended up landing a job with a cookbook company, of all things. And this cookbook company wanted her to go buy groceries and then take those groceries and prepare meals from them so that they could take pictures to put in the cookbooks. They paid her to do this. And then they said, not only are we going to pay you to do this, Nancy, but the food that you go purchase, you get to keep all of that food, and the meals that you prepared, you get to keep all of that too, and it's going to be enough, more than enough to feed you and your family. What an amazing story of God's provision. We have witnessed in our time frame, through the cloud of witnesses, people who've given different amounts. We're blessed by it with this beautiful facility. We're blessed as we look around the community and see those that we get to engage and partner with in ministry and the ongoing ministry that continues to go on in our community through Christ Community Church, but through other organizations as well. But still, it makes me wonder, what are we willing to sacrifice? What gifts are we willing to place in the basket to further the mission of God, to further the mission of this church? I don't know what any of you give, for good reason. I only know what my husband and I contribute. And I'm going to challenge every single one of us to something this week. And a challenge that hopefully we'll engage in as well. To prayerfully consider how much God is asking you to contribute to the ministry of Christ Community Church. How much God is asking you to give back for God's glory. It might be a sacrifice. It might be a gift. It could be a tithe. But we have been blessed to be a blessing. And I have no doubt in my mind that as we step forward in faith, God will bless what is offered. God has the power to multiply the gifts that we offer. God did it with Amram and Jochebed. In faith, we are told, they placed this child that they hid for 3 months in a basket and offered this child to God. And because of that, they were blessed with a couple of more years to be able to keep this child in their home. And yes, offered this child back once again to one day have this child grow and actually deliver them from the bondage and slavery of Egypt. We've been delivered from bondage. Are we willing to sacrifice for God's glory, to contribute to the mission of this particular congregation so that others might know of the life and the freedom that we received and have because of God's goodness and grace? Would you pray with me, please?